Hello learners. Today we are going to discuss about selection of research topic. In the earlier video on basics of research, you got to know about what is research and the basic terms used in research and the various steps to be followed while conducting a research study. The first important step was to decide on the topic for your research. So in this video, we will learn about how to select a research topic. Here we will focus on review of literature, research questions, objectives, hypotheses, and operational definition. The first important thing that the students face is deciding on a topic on which to do research. While selecting the topic, one needs to keep in mind that it should be a research-worthy topic. Many a times, students pick up topics that may not have that much significance. For example, finding gender differences in stress. Though we need to know the variation in the level of stress experienced by males and females, this in itself may not give us any significant insight and may not have much implications. But if we also study how stress is perceived by different genders or their coping strategies in relation to the stress, then it will have implications for suggesting and employing particular coping strategies for specific stressors. So, how to select an appropriate research topic? Let us see this now. While selecting a topic, you need to keep the following things in mind. First is relevance. First of all, you need to remember that the topic needs to be relevant, has implications, and is specific in nature. It should have some implications, as I mentioned earlier, that studying stress and coping will have implications for employing more effective coping strategies. It should also have specificness, that is, it needs to be specific. The topic cannot be general, like exploring stress among adolescents or studying job satisfaction among employees. It needs to be specific, like studying job satisfaction and emotional intelligence among private and government sector bank employees. You also need to ensure that the topic is related to your specialization you had taken in the MAPC second year. For example, if you have taken clinical psychology as your specialization and you are taking a topic like employee motivation and job satisfaction, then it is not related to the specialization. The objective of taking up a specialization in MAPC is you are specializing in that area. So you are required to do the practical, the internship as well as the project in that area so that you will learn things firsthand in that particular specialization. Think of your interest area, the tentative field you want to focus on in your specialization. For example, if you have taken counseling psychology specialization, then think of your interest in this. You want to study children, women, or elderly, or migrant workers, or children with special needs, or the youth, etc. And think of any specific problem or issue you want to take up. For example, bullying, or work life balance, or issues faced by the elderly, or learning problems in children, behavioral problems, etc. So you need to decide on whom you want to do the study and what issue or problem you want to focus on. After deciding your interest area, you need to find out what are the studies already conducted in this area. For this, you need to undertake a review of existing literature in the field. So, we have review of literature. Why do we need to do review of literature? Let us see. Review of literature is an important step that will help you know the already conducted studies in your interest area. So it helps to frame your topic, refine your topic, and make it focused. It helps you to select the variables that you can take for your study. It provides the theoretical background of it. It is very important to root your study in relevant theories so that you have a base to explain your findings later on. It also provides a rationale for your study. It enables you to formulate proper research methodology for your study. Now, how do we collect this literature? What are the various sources? Now, these sources are journals, dissertation and thesis, books, internet database, search engines, conference proceedings, review articles, and so on. You can visit the libraries of educational institutions, or online journals and books are also available of different publishers and universities that you can refer to. Sodh Ganga is a repository of Indian dissertations and theses, so you can refer to theses and review the studies and the literature available there. One important thing to note here is that we need to differentiate between the review of literature and summary of literature. Students mostly write a summary of literature in their dissertation instead of doing a review of literature. A summary of literature is just summarizing the studies that study 1 has been done on this topic, or study 2 done by so and so has taken this sample and findings are this, and so on. So it is basically a listing of different studies. On the other hand, review of literature is, as the name indicates, a review of the related studies. It is not just citing the various studies, but analyzing these studies and discussing the things in a flow and in an organized manner, ultimately leading to the rationale of the study. Discussion of these studies should point out the research gap and prepare the justification for undertaking the present study. You need to ask yourself when you are doing a review of literature, what is the research gap here? For example, you are seeing studies on resilience and adjustment among women who have faced domestic violence. But maybe locus of control has not been studied. So you want to say that those who have internal locus of control may be more resilient and consequently have better adjustment. So pointing at the research gap is very important in building up the rationale of the study or justifying why you want to do this particular study. So now we know that to select an appropriate research topic, review of literature plays an important role. Then, after finalizing the topic, we frame the research question. It is basically the question that we want to ask in our research, and we want the answer for it through our research study. It is also called research problem. It requires skill to turn your idea into a researchable question or formulate a research problem that can be studied scientifically. Next is formulating the objectives and hypotheses for the study. Sometimes after formulating a research problem, you can directly go to framing hypothesis, but we can also do both. Objectives are very specific what we want to do in our research study. It is expressed in behavioral or actionable terms, for example, to find out, to examine, to compare, and so on. Thus, it tells us exactly what we intend to do in our study. Always remember one thing, that while framing your objectives, keep your topic in mind so that you do not deviate from your main concern. Thus, objectives need to be specific, clear, precisely worded, indicate the variables and the sample. After we frame our objectives, we need to prepare hypotheses for each of our objectives. Hypotheses are tentative statements or assumptions in relation to the particular objective, and this hypothesis is tested to prove it correct or incorrect. How do we formulate hypotheses? Based on the existing studies or earlier findings or one's assumptions about a phenomenon or situation. Why do we need hypothesis? Because it gives us a direction, a focus to our study. What we are going to study, what kind of data we are going to collect. There are also different types of hypothesis. Let us see this. One is null hypothesis, which basically states that there is no difference. For example, there is no significant gender difference in stress. Whereas an alternate hypothesis is one which is a directional statement. For example, girls face significantly more stressful situations than boys. Now, after we formulated our objectives and framed hypotheses for each of these objectives, how do we test this hypothesis? By collecting data or gathering evidence. Here, there may occur errors while testing our hypothesis. Errors in testing a hypothesis may arise because of a variety of reasons. It may be due to faulty research design, or errors in sample selection, or use of inaccurate data collection techniques, etc. So, two types of errors may result here in hypothesis testing. These are type 1 error and type 2 error. Type 1 error is when the null hypothesis is actually true but we reject it. And type 2 error is when the null hypothesis is actually false but we accept it. For example, the null hypothesis that there is no gender difference in stress is actually true, correct, but we reject it and we conclude that there is significant difference between boys and girls. So it is a type 1 error. Similarly, type 2 error is when the gender difference is actually present, but we conclude from our findings that there is no difference between them on stress. So, till now, we learned about research questions, objectives, and hypotheses in a research study. At the end, one more important thing I would like to focus is operational definitions. We need to provide operational definitions of the variables taken. This makes it clear how we have defined the variables in our study. Thus, it is a working definition of the variables taken. For example, when I have taken happiness as a variable in my study, what do I mean by it? How I have used it in my study? What meaning do I indicate for it? This needs to be clear so that it avoids confusion and also helps other researchers while referring to my study. So learners, in this video, we learned about the selection of a research topic. We discussed about the review of literature, research questions or research problem, formulating objectives and hypotheses, type 1 error and type 2 error, and operational definition of the variables taken in the study.